Today's video, I'm going to introduce you guys to a brand new game, which is Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade. Now, this game is not out globally yet. The global launch date is December this year, so we only have 2 more months to go. But the Japanese server has already been up and running for almost a year now. So what I've done in preparation for the global launch is I went onto the Japanese server to just play around with different characters to test them out, etc. And that's what brings me here today with this video guide, which is going to be a complete beginner's guide on everything you need to know when you start out this game. So I'm going to talk a bit about reroll, so you guys kind of know what to look for when you're actually doing the rerolls, which characters, what cards should you be aiming at, and I'll also give you guys some kind of team lineup information that will make your life a lot easier when you actually progress through this game, and also, what are some of the potential challenges you may encounter and how to overcome them, etc. Alright, so first of all, I just want to give a bit of background context on how did I actually come up with this guide. Basically, what I try to do is I try to mimic this Japanese server as to the state on how the global version is going to be like when it first launches. So by that, what I mean is that I try to only focus on contents, will only play through contents that will be available when global launches. So for example, on the story mode, I believe the Japanese server only started with 9 chapters. So that's kind of why I only went up to the first 9 chapters and I kind of stopped as soon as I hit chapter 10. And same thing for like this game mode, I only went up to the ones. So basically this game mode kind of unlock more stages as you progress further in the story chapters. I once again only went as far as up to chapter 9 so that I don't kind of get extra resources which wouldn't be available when the game first launches. And same thing for kind of like those story events, etc. I didn't bother with any of those events which are only available later on in the game to make sure that I am kind of, once again, do not getting any too much extra resources that wouldn't be available to everyone when the game first launches globally. So that's basically what I've done in order to mimic the global environment. And what I've also done is just to test how far I can go with what I would think is the most accessible team lineup possible. And after just less than 2 weeks of playing, I think I'm on day 12 or day 13 right now. I am already able to beat vast majority of content, so I'm pretty sure some of the tips and guide I'm going to give you guys is going to be pretty good, or at least enough to clear vast majority of the content. The hardest content is probably those 2 modes. This game mode I have managed to beat the hardest content only on as in day 10 or day 11, so it did took me quite a few tries in order to beat the hardest content on this one, because it kind of forced you to use multiple characters rather than just one single team. And then this content basically falls into 3 stages. I haven't managed to clear the hardest stage yet, but I managed to clear the first 2. The hardest stage, I feel like I'm still a bit far away. I probably still need to grind for like at least another week before attempting that. So that's going to be quite a slow process, but I still think it's feasible. And you do get some free SSR from that. So this is definitely something you want to do. But at least this one is a one-time only reward, so there's no rush for you to beat that. Unlike this one, the other hard content, this one you are able to try every single day. That's quite important for you to beat this as early as possible. This other end game content, it's just like one time only, so there's no real rush for you to get that. And then this game mode, I also haven't gone very far, but I believe this game mode wasn't even available when the Japanese server first launched. So once again, I'm going to exclude that because you guys won't even see this on the global version yet. So that's basically on the basis of how did I come up with this game guide or beginner's guide, and also I just try to make this guide applicable to as many people as possible by forcing myself to only use like SR characters with lower ranking. So you can tell the rarity of a character by kind of the border they're surrounded by. So if they're surrounded by like this multi-rainbow color, then they will be SSR. Whereas if they're surrounded by this yellow border, then they will be only an SR character. So you can see here, vast majority of the characters I use were the ones that have been leveled up. They are all with a yellow border, so white border, etc. Obviously, I do have some SSR character. Like you can see, I actually have a lot of SSR character, but I didn't use any of them, so they're all at level 1. The only SSR I have used is Gojo, and I'm making an exception for him because everyone start off with 1 SSR for free in this game. And obviously, you can choose between different characters, but Gojo is the one that everyone should pick. And because you're guaranteed that one SSR character, I included him in my team just to show that still it can be achieved by everyone. That is the case on the Japanese server at least. On the global one, we may have to wait and see because basically there's this pre-registration page and the free SSR ticket I was talking about is basically one of the milestones for the number of pre-registration. So right now we are only just on the 4 million pre-registration. If we can somehow get 10 million in the end, then everyone have this one single SSR ticket that everyone can get for free. And you can keep on resetting that ticket by the way, until you get the character you want. So it's like 100% guarantee you can get Gojo from that. But we are still a bit far from this pre-registration. So let's see whether we are actually able to get this on the global version. Yeah, but hopefully we should be able to do. And if we do get that, everyone should be going after Gojo. So that's kind of why I still included him in my team for this gameplay. And then the same thing for what we will call the memories for the cards in this game. Once again, I try to focus mainly on just the SRs. There are some SSR cards that you're able to see, but those are the ones you get for free. So for example, I already showed you this card earlier, right? So this card with Jogo's picture on there, this is the card that you can get for free in this game when you actually beat this particular game mode. So, obviously I have already beat the first 2 stages of it, but that's kind of why I already have access to this card. And because I can get it for free in this game, that's why I include it in my gameplay or my walkthrough when I actually tried out this game. And then the only other SSR I sometimes use is this one, but once again, this card you actually get for free where you attempt the beginner mode. So basically, in the beginner missions, you get one copy of that SSR card every single day. So everyone have access to this one as well. So I will still want to say that even though I am using some SSR because they are the ones you can get for guaranteed for free in this game, my game guide should still be applicable to pretty much everyone out there. Alright, now let's take a look at the reroll tier list for Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Prey. Now, when it comes to rerolling in this game, I split all of the characters and also memory cards into 2 buckets based on their rarity. So I have here at the top all of the ones which are SR or R rarity, and then the ones at the bottom would be the SSRs. And the way I split out those two is because, first of all, I already demonstrated in my Japanese account that's possible to beat this game using only the SSR you get for free or get for guaranteed, and then complement that with the rest of your team will just be made up of SR units, etc. So from my point of view, those SR units I have used, they are kind of the bare minimum that you need in order to make sure you can beat this game regardless of your reroll status. So as a result, I classify them as must-have, and also because they're lower rarity as well, right? The SR unit and R unit, which are like so much more likely to pop up, you should almost be getting them as a byproduct during your reroll process anyway, so you don't have to go particularly too hard to look out for those SR units. So that's kind of why I put them under the must-have category. Now, for the reroll, those are the SSR units that you should actually be aiming for. Obviously, it's still possible for you to do it without any of the SSR. I've already demonstrated that on my account, but it will just make your life so much easier. And let's be honest, who's going to reroll for SR unit? Like, everyone's going to be reroll for SSR. So that's kind of the way I want you guys to interpret my tier list, is that you should be aiming for an SSR at the bottom that I have here at the bottom. However, no matter which SSR you are going to go after, as a bare minimum byproduct, you need to make sure the rest of the characters you got would contain a good selection of the SRs I have at the top as well. So that's what I would classify as an optimal reroll for this game. Okay, also something else to mention is that when I have Gojo here, what I mean is not a dupe for Gojo, but not the Gojo that you're guaranteed to get already in the game. So remember, depending on your pre-registration, how many pre-registration we can get in global, we may already be guaranteed one SSR unit as a result of this ticket. So every single the first priority for SSR is going to be 100% Gojo. So if we do happen to have this pre-registration reward, then we will be able to select Gojo from that. And then for the rerolling, we can also go for another Gojo, which is dupe, which I also think is a very, very good idea. And I'll talk about that later why. But if it happens that we do not get this pre-registration reward, then you should just aim for the reroll to get at least Gojo as one of the must-have, as well as some of the SR units. if possible. So that's what I would classify as the reroll process, depending on whether we actually hit this pre-registration milestone. Okay, so I am gonna talk about the must-have first, and I'm gonna use the team that I use to be off the game content to just kind of show you guys why those SRs are perfectly fine in order to beat all of the content in this game by itself. So first of all, you'll be starting up with one Gojo that I already said. You'll be guaranteed to get that as either part of your pre-registration ticket reward, or you'll be rerunning for that. So that's an absolute must-have regardless. And then what you tend to do is that you have to know this Gojo, even though he's like super strong, he leaves the battlefield after just 7 turns. So you kind of need Gojo in order to wipe out all of the enemies within those 7 turns. He kind of need to one-shot every single time when he makes an attack. And in order to do that, you need to complement him with 2 buffers. So that's kind of why in the next row or the next tier, I have 3 buffers who are all equally as good, and you only need 2 of them. You are basically just trying to get 2 of them, and then you complement the last unit with complement the last position on your team with this unit, which is only our unit. And basically the idea here is that, for example, Yaga and Nanami is able to buff up your Gojo every single turn. The buffs in this game actually stack up, and basically the buff lasts for 4 turns for Nanami, take an example, and for Yaga as well. So if you actually are able to continuously buff them up, then your Gojo is going to be super strong towards the end of the battle, which is basically the state that you want to get to, because normally the boss appear at the end. Now, if you do not have this character, then what happens is that basically when you use the buff skill, they basically deplete some of your skill gauge. Curse gauge, I think that's what it's called in this game. And basically, if you do not have a way to buff up your gauge yourself, then you only have enough skill gauge to use 2 skills consecutively, and then you kind of need to go and recharge, use your normal attack for 1 turn, and then come back next turn with buff and alternate like that. However, what this character is able to do is that he is actually able to increase the skill gauge for everyone else on your team, and what that essentially allows you to do is that you're able to back buffing up your whole team continuously for at least solid 6 or 7 turns consecutively, and that basically is going to make a massive impact to the strength of Gojo, because without him, essentially you can only use your buff every other turn. With him, you can use your buff every single turn, so almost you immediately double the amount of buff you're able to give to your Gojo. But that's kind of what this is by default, kind of my go-to team. And you can also see this team are super free-to-play friendly, because it's made up of 2 SR unit, 1 R unit, and just 1 SSR, which you can guarantee anyway. So that's kind of why this is my go-to team for pretty much every single content in this game. Now, in terms of the buffer that you want to use, there are 3 buffers. They're all equally as good and can be used in different scenarios. So you just need 2 of them, to be honest. Yaga and Nanami give much better buff than Momo, because their buff lasts for 4 turns, whereas the buff Momo gives, it only lasts for 2 turns, and it's also 1 use only. So that basically means that if you actually use an attack on the first turn, then it wouldn't even be available in the second turn, etc. But that's kind of why Yaga and Nanami are much better buffers. Yaga have the strongest buff, I think, like even stronger buff than Nanami, but Nanami have much better damage output. So if you just want like a pure buff, then you should be going for Yaga. If you actually want to do a bit of damage just to help out the team a bit, then Nanami is probably better in terms of like pure damage perspective. But Momo is probably the most defensive out of them, because every single time when Momo uses an attack, she's able to enter an evasion status, which basically allow you to avoid 1 hit. And that's actually pretty nice, especially when you actually consider putting her in the same team as Gojo, who already have damage immunity. What this is actually going to mean is that on your team of 4, you have 2 characters who can be immune to damage. So that makes your survivability a lot stronger, and that's kind of why Momo, even though the buff is not as good, I actually find herself a lot more useful when you try to push the harder content, because every single time you can just kind of reroll for a lucky scenario where you dodge all of the enemy attacks, etc. That kind of thing. So that's kind of why Momo's, I would still think like she's just as good as the other 2, and also she also have a stun capability, and also her ultimate attack is AoE, which is pretty rare in this game. So those are also pretty useful utility every now and then. You won't be using them all the time, but every now and then they could be useful as well. So that's kind of why Momo is just as good as Yaga and Nanami. Now, in terms of the R unit, already talked about the importance of him. I think he's called Kaido. He's an original character for this game, by the way. So that's kind of why I'm not 100% sure on his name. But on that note, it's really nice that this game actually introduced original characters and also original storyline. It kind of just brings a bit more to this game rather than just kind of re-watching the anime or rereading the manga over and over. So that's kind of why it's quite nice to have original character, and he's definitely very very good. And then you also have him. He is more kind of like a cheese unit because he have the highest stun rate in the game, and you can do some like if you're just facing up against like one single boss enemy, sometimes what I tend to do is I just try to cheat through the content by having him to stun the boss like 4 times or 5 times in a row. It takes a bit of luck and you may need to retry it, but it's definitely possible. So that's kind of why he is also very good to have. Once again, he's a rare unit, so you should almost be guaranteed to get him regardless as well. And then for the last one in the reroll, in terms of the must-have category, it's basically that is only used for this particular content. Let me show you. Um, so basically, for this particular type of content, you need to battle 5 different stages of enemy. And because I already mentioned earlier, Gojo disappear after turn 7. Normally, there's no way Gojo can cruise through all 5 stages because every stage will have like at least 2 or 3 enemy as well. So there's no way Gojo is able to help you as the only DPS through all of those stages. So as a result, you do need another damage dealer in your team, and that can be made up of any other SSR, or if you do not want to go for a specific SSR, then Nakamura is one of the best choices out there. So that's kind of why in the last tier of the must-have, what I said is basically you need at least any other SSR, or you can go for Nakamura, who is probably the best alternative if you do not have SSR unit as your second damage dealer. And the reason why Nakamura is so good is because he basically have an normal skill attack, which is AoE. So this one is AoE, and also his special skill is also AoE. And what that basically means is that it kind of perfectly complements the main disadvantage Gojo have, which is that Gojo, even though he's very strong and able to one-shot, his normal attack and skill attack are one target only. So if you are trying to use Gojo to clear out stages with loads of enemies, it's gonna use up a lot of his turns, and remember he only stay on the field for 7 turns. Whereas if you can use Nakamura, who is able to do AoE attacks, it just perfectly complement with the fact that Gojo is more suited for stages with less enemies, whereas Nakamura you can use him for stages with loads of different enemies. And it's also particularly helpful that he have his special skill as an AoE. I think he's like one of the I think there's probably only 1 or 2 characters in this game who have a special skill. I think there's only actually no. Gojo also have a special skill which is an AoE, but outside of Gojo, I think there are only like maybe 2 characters with a special skill that's AoE, and Nakamura is able to do that, and that's very very useful. Once again, in the same content, I think it's called like investigation. This content is very useful in this scenario because basically what happens like there can be some annoying waves with enemies that can do like AoE attack, and it's really hard to fight against them. But if you happen to have his ultimate skill, Nakamura's ultimate skill charged up, what you can do is you go into battle with 3 buffs, and then he just uses his ultimate skill and just one shot everyone. Obviously, you can only do this once during that mode because you kind of need to wait for your special skill to be charged up in the previous battle. But still, it's a very, very useful utility to have. So that's kind of why I feel like Nakamura is the best alternative solution if you do not go for any other SSR units on your team. So that's kind of what I would classify as the must-haves. So now then let's move on to the reroll target. So those are the SSRs I should really be going after when you're actually doing the rerolling. The first one I would like to point out is another Gojo dupe, and that's because when you actually dupe a character in this game, you actually increase their stats by quite significantly as well. So you would increase, sorry, that's not the right one. You would, is it this? No. Must be this. So when you actually increase Gojo's to the first level, when you actually dupe it, he actually increased by 25% in terms of all his stats, which is absolutely, absolutely massive. It will allow your Gojo to be able to, like what I said before, one shot a lot of the enemies much earlier without relying on other ways to buff him up, and just make your whole gameplay so much easier. Now you could argue there's alternative way of doing it, for example by equipping him with an SSR memory card instead. However, I still feel Gojo is much better than having another SSR memory card, because first of all, if you're duping Gojo, you don't need to spend any extra resources to level up Gojo, because if Gojo will still be at the same level, he would just increase his dupe. Whereas if you are actually using a memory card in order to make him stronger, you actually have to level up the memory card. So that's kind of one reason why a dupe, in my opinion, is actually better than a memory card. And also, even though a memory card may be like an SSR memory card may be better than an SR memory card, but if you consider the 25% increase in stats Gojo will be able to get, that is more than enough to make up the difference between an SSR memory card and also an SR memory card. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And another reason why I don't particularly recommend memory cards is that every now and then in this game there would be events occurring. I think there's like one event every 2 weeks or so, and within those events you would then essentially be able to get free SSR memory cards when you actually exchange for items, etc. So obviously I didn't do this event yet because I want to mimic what's available at global launch. But if I am to actually do this event, you can see I can get free SSR memory cards from that. And as a result, unless you're able to get your loads of dupes for your SSR memory card, otherwise it's very likely that any SSR memory cards you pull at the start of the game will eventually be power cracked by other SSR cards that you can actually get for free later on, because you will actually be able to dupe them out, etc. So that's the reason why I personally think another dupe for Gojo is actually better than another stronger memory card, etc. Now, the next tier, I would then have what I would call the endgame helpers. Once again, you don't actually need them to beat the content. I demonstrated that already on my account. However, even though I haven't needed them right now, I have only been playing the game for less than 2 weeks, and I can see lots of reasons why they would be helpful later on. Nobara is definitely the best character out there outside of Gojo. And the thing that Nobara is really nice is that in this game there's element affinity, and basically whatever is strong against Gojo's attack would be weak against Nobara's attack. So basically whatever is strong against blue is going to be weak against yellow. They're kind of the polar opposite of each other. So if you actually get really hard endgame content where your Gojo is not able to help you much, then Nobara is gonna be a massive help in those scenarios. So even though I haven't found the need for her yet, I can see a reason why in the future she will be really good. So that's kind of why I put Nobara here. And also, her ultimate attack is do insane damage, by the way. Her ultimate attack can be either single target or AoE if you actually set it up. If you actually set it up and still use a single target, it's actually stronger than Gojo. But, that's just something to bear in mind. But, if you have to pick just one SSR, Gojo is still going to be better than Nobara, mainly because Gojo also have like damage immunity, etc., whereas Nobara, being like a pure glass cannon, she's like really fragile. So you will have much easier game progression with Gojo rather than with Nobara. And then I'll have two memory cards, and basically those two memory cards are both really useful and also somewhat unique, so they are less likely to be power crept. This one allows you to heal your whole team, which is once again really useful in this really difficult content when you have to battle 5 stages of enemy. If you actually have a way to heal up your team without bringing a healer, this is like a massive help, so that's really nice. And this one is also really useful for this stage because it allows you to accelerate your special attack gauge, and your special attack gauge can be carried over from one stage to the next stage. So this is super useful as well. So that's kind of what I would recommend as endgame helpers, because they would definitely be really useful in a lot of different scenarios. And then I have at the bottom what I call early game accelerators. So those are the SSR memory cards, which would be able to buff up your skill damage for your Gojo, etc. Now they are all equally valid because they all kind of buff up your attack by the only difference is some can only be activated for special skill, some can be activated for all skill, and then some buff up for 2 turns but lower buff, some buff up for 1 turn but stronger buff, etc. But the reason why I only think they're valid for early game is because I already mentioned, first of all, a lot of time you can get free SSR memory card later on, and if you can actually dupe them out, they're going to be better than your single copy of those cards. And then the other thing is that once you get, I think about like 4 days in or 5 days in, you should be able to clear this content, which actually give you a really strong SSR memory card. And this card is actually more suited on Gojo than any of the other SSR memory cards I have out here. So as a result, yes, this card, they are really good. They will be able to help you for the first 4 or 5 days. But as soon as you unlock this, which you can then eventually dupe it all the way up, this card is going to be your go-to choice for Gojo. So those cards then kind of become power crab, etc. So that's kind of why I feel like they are lower tier, mainly because they're only useful for early game rather than late game.